Alright, everybody, so welcome back to some more content. This video is going to be about the new patch 13.10 and more so about the types of builds you're going to be going for on every single top laner in the game. Now, to be fair, I'm not talking about literally every single top laner because, to be honest, you can play any champion top lane. So, at a certain point, I'm going to stop, right? I'm thinking around the 1% pick ratio and pick rate threshold because from that point, you're just looking at troll champions or champions who are very rarely picked to the point that no one plays them. But yeah, let's just get right into it, starting off with Ornn. And this way is going to kind of focus on how champions' builds have changed after the patch. So yeah, Ornn's builds are mostly the same as before, where you're going for a Sunfire Aegis first item in a lot of cases to get that armor with you, because the armor works against a lot of matchups really well and it gives you more laning power. Building that in the middle of the lane can be quite like game changing for you in some cases, so Sunfire is a great option most of the time. Then we're looking at building your boots, let's say steel caps and your Jak'Sho. A lot of people build Radiant Virtue on Ornn as well nowadays, and I feel like it's a decent option, but I would stick to Jak'Sho most of the time because you really want to max out both resistances, given that ADCs now deal both magic damage and armor damage, right? You kind of want to 2 damage no longer a thing, which is a good thing, but still, you got to have a lot of both resistances. So I'm thinking that a Jak'Sho combined with like a Gargoyle Stoneblade at some point is a very nice combo. Now, one more thing you can build nowadays is actually Abyssal Mask. I'm not sure where it is. There we go. Let me see if I can maybe get it like I'm kind of new to this whole setup thing, but yeah, you can get Abyssal Mask at some point, and I feel like it's like compared to Force of Nature, it's a very decent choice because Force of Nature got hit very hard by the changes to it because it went from like a multiplicative cut to magic damage to just extra magic resist. And the thing is, getting that magic resist takes 10 stacks of Steadfast. That is like way too much. Way too much. I've had games where I would have Force of Nature, but I wouldn't even like proc the thing throughout the vast majority of the fights I had with it. So Force of Nature is definitely like in a terrible position with it, like compared to where it used to be. And that's where kind of Abyssal Mask comes in, because the thing about Abyssal Mask is that you get that magic resist instantly. Okay, as soon as you're facing like 3-4 people, you get that magic resist. So if you have a mage on your team or someone else that does magic damage, as you should, because if you're the only source of magic damage on your team as Ornn, then you're kind of going to lose. But still, if you have some sort of mage on your team who's actually be able to do damage, like a Victor, a Syndra, Vladimir, then Abyssal Mask is certainly the better MR choice as opposed to Force of Nature. So yeah, aside from that, the builds are just mostly the same as before. He is a tank. Tanks didn't get too many changes. Jax. The thing about Jax is that, where's the thing? There we go. The thing about Jax is that before we're mostly going for a Divine Sunder on Jax, right? We're going for Divine Sunder, our boots, then we build for the game, like we go for a Frozen Heart sometimes, then we build wherever we need to. Sometimes we go for a Bork first item, right? And then go for Divine Sunder, after which we build into our boosted items. So that was how it was before, but now I think that Triforce is another really viable option that you can go for instead of Divine Sunder. Because the thing is, right, we did go Divine Sunder basically every single time on Jax, but now with the new changes, Triforce is really sick on Jax because you get more stats, and the Threefold Strike allows you to play even better with it because it makes kiting you a bit more difficult in that even if someone kites you, you can still catch up to them and have your Threefold Strike up still while you're fighting them. So it makes it better in team fights and situations where you're up against the champion. You can kind of keep distance between you two. So yeah, now if you're up against a team that doesn't have a lot of tanks, or if you're in a matchup where you don't need the healing, you can go for a Triforce, right? And then get into the rest of your build. One synergy you can actually try to go for is a Triforce Sterak's synergy. Everybody knows that these two items work really well together, so you can go for those two because the Threefold Strike from Triforce goes into Sterak's, and you get like the 50% of that base AD as additional bonus AD. So you can go for the synergy on Jax nowadays and enjoy it. The tenacity from Sterak's is going to be very much appreciated by Jax. The size may not be, but yeah, I mean, Jax is loving the new Triforce. You're going to be able to build it, and I feel like it's quite underutilized at the moment, at least. Now, I wouldn't go for Hullbreaker too much on Jax. I feel like it's like a bit too overkill, right? In my opinion, like, you could go for it anyway, But I think it's better to just go for the bruiser items you need against the enemy team. Instead of going for Hullbreaker, you go for like, well, let's just clear this out. I'm about to go using this whole interface. So let's say you're going for like some sort of weird setup with like your Sterax, let's say, right? You go for the bruiser items that you need for the enemy team. But if you go for a Hullbreaker, it's just like he's already good at split pushing. He already beats most champions on side lanes. He already kind of has all the resistances he needs and does a bunch of burst damage. So I wouldn't really go so far as to go for Hullbreaker. It's a bit overkill, in my opinion. Okay? I feel like you can't just go for it anyway if you want to, but at some point as Jax, you kind of just have to go look at flanking the enemy team. And if you're working with your team, then you're gonna be, if you're working with your own team, then that Hullbreaker extra resistances are coming to impact less and less and less. And also, we kill turrets quickly enough anyway. Well, Triforce are gonna kill them even quicker, so it's just, again, it's a bit overkill. Okay, the things that Jax is good enough at doing are things that he needs to be even better at doing because he's already one of the best. Okay, so aside from that, I wouldn't say the other item changes have impacted him too much. There's some troll options you can go for in terms of Abyssal Mask, which I'd say are insane. Don't go for this. That extra 5% magic resist you're reducing their magic resist by is not going to be worth it at all. Just go for some damage. And one thing that's more popular right now is going Zhonya's Hourglass on Jax, actually. So you can get into a team, stun everyone, ult, get some damage off, be tanky, and then just like do Zhonya's, wait, and then get your counter-strike up again. I feel like it's only working well against all-attack reliant teams. If you're up against like a mage, this won't really work too well because this kind of setup is kind of like what Vlad uses in terms of like you go in, you pool, you phase rush, you're caught, you Zhonya's, and then your pool's up again so you can keep cooking basically, right? So if you're up against a team that has a mage, then your counter strike won't do anything against them, right? So like I guess you get Zhonya's because of the mage, so you have something against them. But this is mostly effective against AD teams where you can kind of just drag on your durability from one counter-strike to two counter-strikes, giving you a lot more room to work with in terms of just like trying to carry fights, I guess, in terms of like, because Zarya has a lot of playmaking potential, right? You can do a lot of creative plays and stuff with the item. I'd say that's basically it in terms of the changes, nothing really else. Kayle's item build is like, Kayle kind of already builds a lot of ADC items, but I would say that aside from your Kraken, right? I mean, aside from your, let's say, dude, actually build sets. Okay. Bam. Where's Ginsu, Kraken Slayer? Like, aside from your Ginsus and your Kraken Slayer, you're not really looking at ADC items all that much, okay? I'd say it's better to go for AP items after this. Obviously, you might go for, Wits End against AP. You can go for a shield bow if you need to be a bit more durable, right? You can still go for these kinds of items in rare cases, but you're mostly looking at going for on hit and going for some magic for some AP, right? So we're going for our Ginsu's, Kraken, let's go our Wits End, for example. You can also, I guess, instead of like going for Ginsu's, you can go for a Nash's Tooth first. So Nash's Tooth first, and then go into like a Kraken Slayer or something, and so you can actually have like another mythic to work with, like a Riftmaker or something. But I feel like this item is kind of built way too well for Kayle, so you're essentially kind of in this pipeline already. I would recommend trying to go for the Kraken Slayer over the Nash's Tooth though, because Kayle already does mixed damage, it's hard to build against, but if you go for Kraken Slayer, you're even more difficult to build against, and you don't want to double down on that strength of Kayle and even be more hard to exist against, to be honest. Kayle gaming, isn't it? So if we're gonna theory craft like a full-on build, let's go first our berserkers, obviously your Ginsu's, Kraken Slayer, then I guess we can go for like a Nash's Tooth at some point, and then we're looking at basically what we need for the enemy team. Against magic resist, we can go for Wits End. Against a team that has a lot of assassins, we're gonna survive a while, we can go for a Zhonya's Hourglass to help that out. We can also just like go for a bit more AP like this, you know, if we want a full-on setup where we're doing a bunch of damage and just more relying on our AP. But I wouldn't really recommend going for the AD side of this equation where we're building like crit items essentially. I want to go for a static Shiv. I want to go for like a Phantom Dancer or whatever. I'd say stick to the AP side after your first 2-3 items, okay? So I'd say this is basically it for Kayle in terms of builds. Her items were definitely changed, but I feel like she's in the same position as she used to be before. K'Sante. K'Sante is basically just like the same old tank, right, as before. Builds haven't really changed too much for him. We're still going for our Iceborne Gauntlet. You can, I guess, go for Jak'Sho's, but the thing about Jak'Sho is that with K'Sante, you gotta be a bit creative in terms of how you ult to be really useful to your team. And Iceborne kind of works with that in that it slows people down to land your Qs, to follow up with them, to chase them down, stuff like that. So I'd say stick to Iceborne. You could, I guess, go for some sort of like weird cheese, Sunfire first and then Iceborne, but I feel like you're not Ornn. You kind of need your Iceborne earlier on to stop like the damage of these bruisers from getting to you. Then we can go for I guess any tank item. It doesn't really matter from that point on because you're just building the entire tank champion tank item pool. One thing that's better about K'Sante now is that he's not really left with a good anti-magic damage option, right? Because we kind of really loved Force of Nature as like our only way of stopping magic damage, right? So that's a little tragic, I'd say, right? But because the thing is, Abyssal Mass doesn't really sound too good on K'Sante, in my opinion. I feel like Force of Nature used to be the perfect item because you kind of like the move speed and stuff like that too. But with it being gone, you're kind of just like, you know, out of luck, essentially, right? You're just kind of relying on Mercury Treads, a very weakened version of Force of Nature, and then I guess the extras you could get from Gargoyles and then Jak'Sho the Protein. But I feel like Jak'Sho is going to have really big issues dealing with AP champions in the next patches. In any case, this is kind of his build. I guess we can go for like an example full build where it's like bam, 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 and then I don't know, I guess a Thornmail, right? Just an example setup. This isn't really what I want to get for every single game. These builds are just example builds, but yeah. Jayce actually, Jayce actually loves the new Yumu's Ghostblade. You can actually, Jayce's gameplay is kind of rigid because you're basically doing the same thing every single game where you're kind of laning, you're bullying someone, you win lane, and then you kind of just roll around the map trying to go to team fights and just impact them at range. But Yumu's allows you to go for a way more energetic and active playstyle because Yumi kind of turns every single assassin-y AD caster champion into a roamer, and Jayce kind of gets an entire new dimension to his gameplay where if you already won lane, if you're already like ahead and you don't really need the extra help from Eclipse to help you win fights, win trades, and etc., you can go for a Yumu's Ghostblade and then start really cooking. Obviously, we're going to go for our tier earlier on to stack that up, but you can go for like some sort of setup where it's like this. I don't know about Prowler's Claw. I guess it kind of works with Yumu's together in that like Yumu's Prowler's Claw is like a very nice combo you can go for to just like, if you're getting a bot lane, for example, you run in, you like throw your thing, you jump in, you get the extra damage from the Prowler's off, and I really doubt the ADC survives that or the support even. But yeah, this is the kind of setup you're looking for if you're going for the whole energetic setup with Jayce. Then you can eventually go for your Mani Moon, maybe get like an Edge of Night or something. Cyril does, and you're looking for an example of a full-on build for this new kind of assassin-y, roamy Jayce playstyle. But obviously the old setup is also, you know, something you can go for, right? Where we're going for our Eclipse, our Mana Immune, boots like that. And then you just build the normal assassin items that you would require with Edge of Night, your Cyrildas, and etc. Now, I wouldn't really go for Prowler's Claw if you're going for this setup, because this setup is like the normal kind of scaling setup for Jayce. And if you're doing this, like the whole thing with Prowler is that Jayce has to get into melee range to use it. Okay, Jayce only has one way to proc it, which is his hammer form jump. And if you're doing this later on into the game where people actually have damage and have good peel, you're gonna be very easy to just swat away and kill. So you kind of have to make your choice based on how your early game is going and how you want the impact you have on the map to be, okay? So if you want to be more active, you go for Yumu's. If you want to be a bit more like scaly, a bit more like stay at the back and do your thing like a usual Jayce, then we're going for an Eclipse. But yeah, that's basically the examples of the builds you can kind of go for. Bam, bam, bam. Malphite. Malphite's builds have just remained the exact same aside from the fact that you can now build like an Abyssal Mask, right? I'd say Abyssal Mask kind of works for Malphite because he does AP damage and he kind of like gets in the melee range and does this whole thing with his ultimate. I don't think that Force of Nature is too good of an option for him nowadays. I feel like Abyssal Mask is just straight up better than Force of Nature because the thing with Malphite is that he's a fast champion, okay? I know it doesn't make sense, but his abilities are fast. Like, he goes in like this. His ult is fast. His abilities just happen when you press them. There's no really, like, slow build-up or whatever. So With Malphite, you kind of want things to happen quickly instead of having to wait for them, which is why I feel like Abyssal Mask kind of synergizes with them a bit better, because you go in, you do more damage to people, you do more damage to ADCs, but you also get that extra magic resist that the Abyssal Mask gives you from being near enemy champions quicker, as opposed to just waiting for Force of Nature to actually start ticking and give you the full stacks of Steadfast. Now, Malphite does love the move speed from Force of Nature, so there's that other aspect of it. If the enemy team has a lot of mobility, etc., you might still be inclined to go for Force Nature if you're looking for an anti-magic damage item. But still, that's basically the only thing that's changed about Malphite's gameplay. We're practically looking at this same setup as before, right? So that's Malphite. Darius. Darius is an interesting case here because a lot of the bruiser items that he uses have been buffed, changed, modified, so he's absolutely liking all the changes. So before, you'd go for like a setup where you're kind of just relying on a Stridebreaker like this. Maybe you go for a Death Stance like a DMP, bam, bam, and then you go for a tank item. Something like this, where you're going for like 3 bruiser items and then 2 tank items. But although the blueprint hasn't changed, the items that you do build have changed. So let's just go through like the changes a bit by bit and then just talk about them real quick hand. So Stridebreaker getting that extra 10 damage has meant that it's still the number 1 item that you build most of the time on Darius. It's got really good wave clear now. The front loaded, like the AD on the item is a bit more front loaded as opposed to Triforce. So like it's still the item you're building in like 60% of your games. So most of the games you're looking at something like this, and then you can go for like a Death Dance if you're up against a heavy AD team. But something has been changed, which is Hullbreaker, which you can actually build with Stridebreaker to be like an insane monster. Hullbreaker got more AD, which Darius absolutely loves, and it's got more move speed. So what you're looking at here is building Stridebreaker and Hullbreaker to have a ton of move speed, ton of damage, ton of just resistances. You're just an absolute meatball that's tough to kill. And this is really good for situations where you're like up against an enemy team, where you're going to be going for flanks, where you're going for just running at the backline alone. Because when you're alone against the backline and none of your team is around you, those resistances just buff you up and you're tough to kill. And you can also add that to a Sterak's Gauge and have that come in at the end too and help you even further. Sterak's having tenacity with the active now is even more impactful than before. So you can go for like a setup like this with these 3 items and just be like a very boss battle champion that's tough to kill and have move speed in spades. Before, if you want to move speed, we have to basically just sacrifice damage and go for Dead Man's Plate. But now with Hullbreaker, that's no longer just something that we're kind of stuck doing. Or you can go for Hullbreaker. You don't get as much move speed, but you get way more stats. I feel like even without the passive of the resistances, the stats of Hullbreaker are straight up better than the stats of DMP. DMP just has very terrible stats. The stats on this item are like the worst out of any legendary item in the game, in my opinion, aside from like some sort of cheese thing like a Magi's or something, right? Now, one thing that's also changed is Triforce. Triforce has been buffed up greatly for Darius. It's now a very strong option for him. So instead of going for Stridebreaker, you can model your entire build around Triforce. The thing about Triforce and Sterak's is that they have a really nice synergy that I think I mentioned before, where the base AD that comes from Trivial Strike goes into the bonus AD from Sterak's Gauge. So you get half of that base AD back again as bonus AD on top of the base AD. So it goes into your abilities as well. So if you're going for Triforce, you almost always want to go for Sterak's. And I feel like with these 2, you have enough damage as is. And you're just basically adapting to what you need against the enemy team. If you're against a full AD team, you can go for a Death Stance. If you're up against a team where you kind of want to split push and don't want to interact with your team too much, you can go for a Hullbreaker and just be a monster. If you're up against some sort of AP magic damage source, you're kind of forced to take Force of Nature. And I know this sucks because Force of Nature did get greatly nerfed, but Darius has no better option in terms of anti-magic damage, right? We're for sure not going to build Momomortius. Momomortius just sucks on Darius completely. Never build it because of how powerful Sterak's is. You don't want to give this juicy baby up. And yeah, maybe, I don't know, Anathemas against some ADCs, Force of Nature, whatever, right? Pick what you need for that match specifically. I'd say aside from that, there's not really too much changes to Darius's builds. We're not really building Goldtrigger at all, even though it's been buffed. It's not a good buff. It's not a good enough buff at all. The assassin items are not really built on Darius. We're not going to be making use of Abyssal Mask either. We don't really, like, we can't really use it because Darius is not a tanky champion. You cannot survive in the middle of an enemy team for that long. You're either killing them or you're dying. So we're not really looking to... Also, you know, we don't do magic damage. So I guess I should have thrown that out first. But yeah. That's Darius. Let's go for Aatrox now. Aatrox's build is basically the same as before, where you're just going for your Eclipse and then whatever you need for that match, right? There's like a bit of an aggressive armor cutting setup. You can go for a Death Dance if you're working to work with your team more. You're up against heavy AD damage. You can now build Stacks a bit more, so that's very good. Goredrinker did get buffed, but I feel like Goredrinker is better on paper, while in reality, the armor and moves you get from Eclipse lets you do way more plays and just outmaneuver things and dodge things a bit better. But I mean, it's kind of preference at this point, which one's better. One thing that kind of is interesting on Aatrox is that now you can go for a U moves, right? You go for U moves now and just roam around. So if you've already one lane and you kind of want to get some cooking done on the map, you can go for U moves. But I would very much hesitate against this, because unlike a Jayce or something, Aatrox gets into like a melee range of enemy champions. So if you're up against like a Fiora who built a Divine Sunder or a Triforce or a Strax or a Starbreaker, and you go U moves, you're going to get completely gutted, right? You can't really fight her. I mean, Aatrox can't fight Fiora anyway, but just to put it into context, that if someone builds a good 1v1 Mythic, go for U moves means that you can't 1v1 them anymore. So make sure you win your lane really hard, or you just don't need to win lane any harder because it's a good matchup anyway, and they're not going to beat you ever in the entire game. So aside from that, we're looking at too much changed builds. Hullbreaker kind of sounds like an interesting option for Aatrox, but I would not really stay too close to it. In my opinion, it's just way too cheese, right? And Ultimate kind of encourages us to play with a team and play team fights, so I'd just stay away from it and just build against the enemy team. Aatrox, just basically nothing has changed for him, if we're being honest, right? So, yeah. And please do not build Prowess Claw on Aatrox. Please. Sion. I say nothing has changed about Sion's setup. You're basically just going for the same stuff as before, where it's like you get your Sunflower Aegis, your boots, and then you can go for your Heartsteel. I guess Hullbreaker is better for Sion right now because it helps out with the whole split push thing, so we can go for like some sort of Tiamat, not Tiamat, Titanic Hydra, Hullbreaker to be even more powerful. But the thing about Sion is that, like, the Hullbreaker buffs don't really change that much for Sion, right? He kind of just did his cooking anyway. So the buffs didn't really impact him too much, in my opinion. So, like, his build hasn't really changed that much. He already built Hullbreaker. He's still going to build Hullbreaker in the games where he already built Hullbreaker. Nothing really has changed about Sion's setup. And I don't think going for AD with, like, a Yumas or something is going to be too good for Sion at all. Just stick to the same old build, and we should be good to go. Fiora. Fiora is absolutely gonna love the mythic changes. She can abuse Triforce. She can abuse everything, man. She can build every single mythic bruiser mythic item. So, like, before you're kind of just stuck with Divine Sunder, but now Triforce is a very nice and viable option that you can go sometimes. So let's just as an example of Triforce first, right? So yeah, Triforce is a very viable example, a very viable item that you can go sometimes. So, and it's better at killing turrets than Divine Sunder, which Fiora kind of struggles with. She doesn't kill turrets that quickly compared to other turret killers. So with Triforce, you can opt for it instead of Divine Sunder if you're up against a matchup where you don't need extra healing for Divine Sunder. You're not up against a tank. You're up against someone you want to just blow up ASAP, and sorry, get as much damage out as possible. Now, we almost always want to get Ravenous Hydra on Fiora. We're kind of tied to this item, and you're kind of getting it before Triforce, actually. So it's more like, let me find Ravenous Hydra here. It's more like this first, and then you can opt for a Triforce. Now, one thing that Fiora can also abuse right now is Hullbreaker, because Fiora kind of just hangs out on the side lane, right? And a champion like Fiora having that many stats is absolutely crazy, in my opinion. You can get a lot of cooking done if you're looking for a split pushy flanky setup, which Fiora actually just does anyway. So she's gonna absolutely love the new Hullbreaker. One thing she's also gonna love is the new Stridebreaker, actually. Let's get into it. The new amount of AD for Stridebreaker means that Fiora can get a lot more done with it. Stridebreaker is a very specialized item for Fiora, and then you're only going into the certain matches where you need to hold the enemy down to get all your procs on them, right? It also helps you because the more moves speed can help Fiora move around faster, which she absolutely loves because of her vitals and her entire playstyle. So, and because you have Hullbreaker as an option, you can just pair up your Stridebreaker with your Hullbreaker to have even more move speed, to still be able to kill tanks, not as fast as Triforce, but still better, I guess, than nothing. But yeah, I mean, Fiora's options have really opened up, and your last items you're just building what you need against the enemy team, like Destance against full AD, Maw against like a full AP team. If you want more abilities, you can go for your Spear Shojin. You can even go for stacks if you're going for a Triforce, right? And get that Tri-Gauge synergy going that I've been talking about with the other champions. So yeah, lots of options here for Fiora. I'd say Gragas' builds are mostly the same. There's nothing for me to even display here. You can go for some sort of scaling setup with your rod, right? Bam. Right, you can go for some sort of scaling setup like this. You can go for some sort of team fighting setup where you're going for Everfrost first instead. Right? Try to go for like as much abilities as possible so you can just be annoying and get CC out as frequently as you can. But I'd say Gragas' builds haven't really changed all that much given that AP items weren't really touched. Riven. Riven's a bit weird in terms of like, you think on paper she'd be able to use a lot of the changes, but not exactly. Because basically speaking, Riven's previous setup is just kind of, I mean, you kind of, I guess she kind of likes the Gorgic changes because she did go Gorgic quite a bit. But we're basically looking at our Ravenous Hydra, then Eclipse, and then just like items that pump us up with a lot of great stats that we need in terms of AD, HP, the wave clear, of course, and most importantly of all, ability haste. We need a lot of ability haste on Riven. So she's not really a champion that can make use of Hullbreaker, for example, or Sterak's. She's going to be building Sterak's anytime soon. And she can't really make use of many of the assassin item changes either, or the ADC item changes. The only item they can kind of go for is Yumu's Ghostblade, I guess. But the thing about Yumu's that's kind of weird is that Riven is, again, one of those champions that has to stay in the face of her enemy. Okay, you have to be up in the face with your enemy. So if your opponent goes for some sort of tank item, or they go for some sort of item that's good at 1v1s, if you can't one-shot them, they're just going to win the fight because they have the better suited combat mythic. So if you're going for Yumu's and want to go for like the Romy setup with the Prowler's Claw, then make sure that you've one lane really hard, because you don't want to get into a situation where you've roamed, you didn't get many kills with the roam, but you've wasted your ult and you come back to the lane and your enemy just kills you. And then because you're building such a risky setup, you've essentially lost the game because of that. Right? You don't want to lose the game and render yourself useful by going for a risky setup that won't pay off. So the safe build is just the same as before, where we're going for let's give it a 6-1 build, right? So where we're going for our Ravenous Hydra, Bam, Eclipse, Cleaver. Maybe instead of Eclipse, we can go for a Gorginker, right? If we want to be a bit more tanky, and then just build against what you need against the enemy team in terms of like a Destiance, Maw. You can go for Cyrillus maybe in some cases to be even more damaging with our abilities than just one-shotty. Like, this is kind of like the safest setup on Riven, but there is an additional side to her. It's just riskier on her than a lot of the other roamer champions because of how close range she is. And, the meat bags really will give you a run for your money if you aren't prepared to take care of them, right? So I wouldn't go for it against, like, your strong one-on-one champions. Camille. For Camille, it's kind of a bit weird, but let's just get right into it. The thing about Triforce being buffed is that we already kind of went Triforce on Camille anyway. It's just that because it's buffed, it's not like a 50-50 instead of being like a 70-30. It is which Sheen item you went for. But both of them were still an option. Now I'd wager that Triforce is a really good option because everyone's ADC killing skills are put to the test right now due to how bot-centric the meta is kind of gearing up to be, right? So Triforce as a kill screech champion is way better because it's more damage than Divine Sunder and it's more stats, right? The Mythic passive is better for you too because who needs like Armor Pen or Magic Pen on Camille? So I feel like unless you're behind in lane and you need the healing against those bruiser champion like a Darius or like a Sett or something, or like you really need that healing against like some other tank even, then I guess you can go for Divine Sunder, but I mean, the healing can just be provided by Ravenous Hydra, which should go second item always anyway. So Triforce, I guess some sort of boots, Ravenous Hydra. Another thing you can do nowadays with Camille is go for the Sterak's, because the Triforce Sterak's synergy is a really, really powerful combo they want to be using as much as possible. Then we're looking at just building against what you need against the enemy team. Do not go for Bill's Mask or the tank items. Also, don't go for Hullbreaker. I feel like Hullbreaker is a bit of a weird choice for Camille to go for, because there's no real good spot to slot it in her build. You don't want a first item. You don't want a second item. The right time to slot it in will be the third item. But the thing about Hullbreaker is that it kind of streamlines how you're going to be playing the game as Camille. But Camille's whole strength is that her mobility allows her to be one of the more versatile champions in the game in terms of like, no matter where the fight's happening, no matter what's going on, you're able to get there in time and make something happen. And in a lot of cases, when you're up into the face of the enemy, you're going to be with your team, and the Hullbreaker isn't going to be proccing that much. Now, you do dive quite a deep. Like, you do a lot of deep diving in that, oh, the enemy team got away, your team spot, and you just go for them, and then the Hullbreaker comes into play. But I think even in those cases, a Sterax would do you a lot better because it gives you way more damage. That shield is going to come into clutch, like, just comes out of nowhere and just surprises the enemy, and the tenacity is going to be super helpful for Fiora, for Camille. Getting the names mixed up, man. And you can get a lot more done with doing stance, for example, if you're up against a full AD team. It's like, I just wouldn't go for Hullbreaker, right? On Camille. So yeah, not many changes really. You're not really looking at your assassin's items or anything like that at all either. Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser's build is basically the same exact as before, right? We're going for your basic AP items. You can go for Riftmaker or you can go for Jackshow, right? Either of the two. Then we're going for your Demonic Embrace, and then basically just tanking up unless we need like a Zhonya's Arbalest or something like that, right? The exact same build as before, nothing really too different, right? He is an AP champion, so he didn't really get a lot of changes in this patch. All right, we're now getting at Irelia, who did have some interesting changes to her setup. First is first, you're never building anything except Bork first item, okay? Bork was always going to be the first item no matter what. It works way too well with her kit. Afterwards, we get into the actually important choices. Now, Irelia can make use of basically... First off, she can make use of the Ginsus Rageblade Mythic, and also the Triforce Mythic. These are the two Mythic options you can go for if you're willing to go for that. I would kind of stay away from Divine Sunder on Irelia because... like, I don't know, Triforce just works way better with her because she kind of wants the attack speed. So the stats from Triforce work way better with Irelia than Divine Sunder works with her, okay? Now, on top of that, instead of going for a Triforce or like something safe like a shield bow, you can go for actually like a Ginsus Rageblade, which is an insanely risky but like powerful item you can go for. If you're up against a team that's not going to kill you too much, or you're really fed, right? If you're super fed or the enemy team doesn't have a lot of damage, you can go for Ginsus Rageblade and just chop everybody up in your way. If you go for this item, it's going to be incredibly difficult to remain tanky against you because you're playing your top lane, right? So assuming you're super fed, you've one lane, so you've already killed the tank a bunch of times, right? Which, okay, let's not spin up too much of a fantasy here, but still, right? So you're fed. No one's going to be tanking against if you go for Ginsu's, and you can pair it up with like a shield bow to be even more difficult to kill. Let's say they have some magic damage, let's go for like a Wit's End, Death Stance, bam, get a Ravenizer or whatever. And then we have like an example of a build right here. But in my opinion, you're not building Ginsu's for the vast majority of your games. It's too risky, right? It's far too risky. So I think it's way better to go for on-hit, right? Without going for Ginsu, so we're going for Wit's End against AP, right? You can go for Shield Blow and then build into a Jackshow to kind of have that Jackshow tankiness and then be incredibly hard to set up, to kill. And then be like more on the tanky side in terms of build. I feel like this is a bit better than the squishy setup because the thing about Irelia is that her laning is not too complicated. You do need a lot of matchup knowledge, wave control needs to be really on point, etc. But the real difficult part with playing Irelia is actually playing her in team fights because it is very easy for teams to just CC you and just sweep you away and one-shot you at the side or something while you're jumping all over the place. So I feel like you kind of want the durability to be able to just stay in the face of the enemy ADC long enough to just melt them down. Like, imagine you're just up in the face of an ADC. You use your W once, but then you don't have it and you got CC'd again. You want to have the tankiness to survive until you can Q onto the enemy ADC again and kill them. So, like, I would not go looking at Ginsu's. Like, it's just way too risky in my opinion, right? Triforce is kind of like in the same boat as Ginsu's, but Triforce is a bit different in that it gives you a bit more of like a variety of stats, and it spikes earlier than Ginsu's in my opinion. I feel like Ginsu's requires some like another item to be really powerful, right? Another on-hit thing. But with Triforce, you get the damage of like as soon as you build it. So, and it also makes it tankier. So you can go for something like this, and then go for like sort of setup where you have the, let's say, the shield first. Where's the shield bow? Okay, I guess no one's built Shield third, third before, but like get your Shield, get your Death Stance, whatever. Get yourself a Maul or a GA. I just go for a setup like this, right? This one spikes better, in my opinion, and then you're still able to slap some meat towards the end game with the more defense items, basically keeping you alive enough to do that. So, yeah. I feel like Irelia's build is kind of going to be about, like, kind of going to be more so how you want to play the game. There's a lot of player creativity here at play. You have a pretty sizable champion item pool to utilize, so you just kind of got to experiment and know what you want to play, but I've kind of laid out the general blueprint right here in terms of the mythic options, etc. Gorgic is not going to be an option. Don't even look at it. I wouldn't go for any of the other, like Starbreaker, not really, not the assassin items. I don't think Hullbreaker is a good option for Irelia too, because we're kind of strapped for time. You got to get the items you got to get right now. So going for Hullbreaker is like, it's like a nice novelty. I think they can go for sometimes, but it's kind of delaying the more powerful things you need. So I won't go for it at all. That's kind of the build for Irelia. Garen. Garen's setup has been quite impacted by the changes because he is a champion who utilized a lot of crit before. We're just going to Berserker Blaze. Starbreaker is going to be the mythic option for us basically at all times. We're not bothering with a Triforce. No Gale Force, right? So Starbreaker is going to be the option we're going for in most cases. And the Hullbreaker being changed the way it is so good for Garen because he's a champion who roams around the map a lot, who's alone a lot of the times. You're like setting up cheese kills using vision. You're diving the back of the enemy team, killing one target, and just trying to leave with your phase rush or something like that. There's a lot of movement-y kind of trickiness that you do with Garen, and Hullbreaker helps just that. It synergizes with the armor and masters you have already on your W. It makes it even more difficult to kill while giving you the move speed and also the damage you need to kind of like outplay entire teams if your macro knowledge is good enough. Now, the thing about Hullbreaker is that the second you buy it, you spike up so hard that you can basically kill everyone on the enemy team. If you have one lane as Garen and your 2 items, it's going to be really tough to actually kill you, right? The enemy team has to be super fed to actually stand a chance against you. So you're very much like you're like, the second you finish Hullbreaker after Starbreaker, you're like the most powerful person on the map as Garen. So that's like a lot of power you can utilize to your advantage. Now, I feel like More Reminder is a bit of a cheese option nowadays because we don't get the attack speed for it, right? I guess if you want to do anti-heal, it's the only option we have because we're certainly not going to go for the Gangplank Chainsword or something. But I really don't like it that much. I feel like the better Zeal item is Phantom Dancer, right? Phantom Dancer has better stats than More Reminder, in my opinion. And if you go for something more AD heavy, you can almost just go for Zeal instead. Like, the thing is, right, look, you're either going for attack speed heavy, or you're going for AD heavy, right? In your next crit item, in your first crit item rather. So our options are, let me think. I guess this, right? So I'm just gonna highlight the ones that are options. And go for Stormrazor, right? Oh, none of the same build. So I'll talk about them one by one. Sorry. So More Reminder, it gives AD, but no attack speed. So I don't recommend this at all unless you need the anti-heal, right? Phantom Dancer is the item with the most utility out of all of them because it gives you more attack speed, so your wave clears better and your E does more damage. It gives you more AD, and more crucially, it gives you more move speed. That move speed is so huge because we're like pairing it up with Starbreaker, giving us passive move speed anyway, so you're going to be running around the map really quickly. And so if you have this with like a Hullbreaker and then a Dead Man's Play or something, you're just zooming around the map like Sonic at that point. So in my opinion, Phantom Dancer has the most amount of utility, and it helps you kill turrets really quickly. That extra spectral waltz thing after you get forward attacks off lets you melt turrets like butter. So I think the Phantom Dancer is the Zeal item of choice. But if you're going for some sort of damage Zeal item they just want to do more damage with, then I would say that Static Shiv is the better option as opposed to Stormrazor, in my opinion. I think the stats of Static Shiv are better because it gives that good amount of attack speed. You really don't want like 15 attack speed. It's a bit pathetic. We really want that damage to be going around into our E, just spinning. And also, I feel like, Static Shiv is just better. Build it instead of the Stormrazor if you want that kind of extra crit damage on top of everything else. Garen also likes to go for Sterak's now. It's actually pretty huge on him. You get the extra tenacity. So yeah, that's pretty good. There's a lot of things you can do with Garen's builds, honestly, man. Let's say you go for your Sterak's, your Hullbreaker to roam more, your DMP, now you're running a map, doing stuff. If you're up against a meaty matchup that builds a lot of armor, like a tank, say you can go for a Cleaver third item, but this is basically the old Garen build that you would go anyway before the item changes. In this case, the only thing different is that you get 10 more AD with Strikebreaker, so yeah, aside from that, everything else is exactly the same. Gwen's build has not changed at all. You go for a Riftmaker, Boots, Nash's Tooth, and then you just basically have like 5-6 items to pick from based on what you need, right? Nothing's really all that different than before. Gangplank only like built Essence Reaver instead of the other 2 Sheen items anyway, so his build hasn't changed that much. But at least now you're not forced to build Prowess Claw for your mythic. You can just build a natural item of Nevore's Quick Blades as your mythic, okay? So that's like a good thing for Gangplank, right? You're not, again, forced to build Prowlers. It was always an awkward thing that you had to have in your kit, right? Because of the stats, because nothing else was that good. But yeah, this is like an example of a great setup on Gangplank. You obviously can use all the crit items, but I would say like stay away from the crit items that are Zeal based. Stay on crit items that are more like AD based, like your Storm Razors, your Navoris, your Collectors. I guess you can go for Gale Force instead of Navoris Quick Blades, but only if you're like in danger, right? If you're up against champions that are going to be like getting on top of you a lot and just making life hell for you, then you can't go for a Gale Force and go for this kind of setup where you're like kind of like a mobile assassin, if that makes sense, right? Tough to kill, a lot of damage output because you're Gangplank, right? Shen is basically building the same like build as before. Nothing is really all that different. You can go for your Heartsteel, you can go for your Jakshows, you can go for whatever you need. Let's say Iceborne Gauntlet if you're up against a sort of AD champion, tank up, Titanic Hydra if you want to wave clear more. I feel like if you're building Titanic Hydra, you gotta build it earlier on though. Dude, this is completely RNG at this point. What items show up? But yeah, yeah, this is more so like a example of like an aggressive build, but without the Heartsteel first, obviously, like Sunfire first, Heartsteel, Titanic, something like that, right? So yeah, I don't really need to show anything with this. It's the same exact build as before, right? But I guess we can kind of just go for one with Jaksho, bam, 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 bam. Yeah, there we go. That's a nice rounded out build. That's good for like most cases. Not 2 boots. Whatever, man. This item picker. It's the same build, alright? 1 boot for each shoe, huh? Illaoi's build is basically the same as before, except the 2 items that she built, which were Hullbreaker and Sterak's, have now been buffed, so she's gonna absolutely love those, right? So we'll go for our Cleaver, damage. Always go Iceborne Gauntlet. We don't really have a lot of mythic choices in Illaoi. You can obviously go for Divine Sunder sometimes, but Iceborne just makes way too much sense. And in many cases, it's better to just keep this champions like in one spot. Like having them stay in one spot and have them like tank more tentacles is more worth it than going for like a Divine Sunder in a lot of cases. But you're looking for a setup like this where you're just kind of insanely tanky, insanely tough to kill, right? Just like shields popping out of nowhere, lots of resistances. Like if you walk out of lane as Illaoi nowadays, and you can get like a Hullbreaker, you're gonna be a threat no matter what, even for like 3-4 kills down. So yeah, I wouldn't say go for like any of the other items. Don't go for a Gore Drinker. Don't go for the new Yumus. That's just too troll. But obviously, if you're an L player, you know that already. Yone. This one's a bit different because Yone&Yasuo have to struggle a bit more. But one thing's for sure, I think it is insane that people build Static Shiv on these guys. Okay. Now for this section, imagine I'm just talking about both Yone&Yasuo. In fact, let me just pull them up here. Let's even have a pick rate top lane. Just 0%. But yeah, I'm going to talk about these guys similarly because they do have very similar builds. As you can see, it's basically identical. But yeah, one thing that I think is insane is how much people build Static Shiv on Yone&Yasuo. I think it just completely sucks, and you don't want to go for it. I mean, it's not completely bad. Obviously, give a lot of mobility, get a lot of like a good spike of early damage, but I feel like it kind of stops you from going for a better mythic. Like IE works way better with Yasuo and Yone, in my opinion, or Gale Force is overpowered right now. Honestly, it's really good right now. So Imagine going for like a Yasuo combo with Gale Force and the damage of it. Like if you ult someone with Yasuo, you get the armor pen on your attacks, 50%, and the Gale Force is going to go through that too. And with how much more damage it does nowadays, it's going to be even more of like a good execute. So that is pretty crazy to utilize. But again, I would stay away from Static Shiv for the most part, and just go for a build around either Gale Force or like an IE or something. I'd say around the Gale Force, really kind of like set up where you want to be super tanky, right? So like pair these two items up, get that lifesteal, get the shield out, get a Death Dance maybe, and just be like an absolute juggernaut monster, you know? Or maybe we can go for a different setup with like Storm Razor, get that burst damage up, but I feel like Storm Razor is a bit troll. Yeah, it's completely troll, isn't it? Yeah, no. I'm gonna go for this. Let's take a look at an IE focus build then. Bam, bam. I guess you could go for a Bork on Yone, or you can also go for a. I don't think a Jackson Yone is that good, but yeah, you can go for like a Bork, bam, bam, right? This could work as well. It all just depends on the game, but no matter what you do, stay away from static, right? And yeah, the current items that you can't build are like your Phantom Dancers, your Storm Razors. Don't build them, even though they just brought it up as an example. Don't build it. I don't think Kraken Slayer is an option for Yone or Yasuo. No, for his Cookblade is not an option. Your crit item pool is basically Immortal Shield Bow, Bloodthirster, IE, that's kind of it, and Gale Force, right? Like, you just gotta pick one of these two mythics, and then these two, you gotta build them two together because they have really good synergy, and then build, like, bruiser items from then on, and you should be good to go on both of these champions. That's 2-1, I suppose. Sett. I'd say with Sett, I mean, Sett still needs a bit more love to be really useful for, to be really powerful in League of Legends, but in any case, in terms of his build, I don't think Gore Drinker is too powerful of a choice. I think given how the game is, you're going to be going for Stridebreaker most of the time. It's the better item. It sets up things better. The thing about the game is that the higher up you go in elo, the worse it is to kind of rely on your W. So if you're relying on your W with like a Heartsteel or something, people are just going to sidestep it, dodge it, and then you're out of luck. Because without like a Bruiser Mythic, the other abilities that you have and your all attacks don't do as much damage. So with your W, you're just there to basically soak up damage and you're dead, right? So that's no good. Sett is one of those champions though who can make really good use of Hullbreaker, so you can go for a Stridebreaker Hullbreaker and be like a complete menace. Pair that up with like a Titanic Hydra, then you're clearing waves, you're tanky. Sterak's too, right? Why not? Sterak's is good for him too. He's one of those champions that's kind of slow and lumbering, so the extra sort of tenacity is going to be quite useful for him. You can go for Hullbreaker, I guess, first item as kind of cheese. I wouldn't really recommend this too much, but you can go for that as well. You can also start Bork if you need the Bork damage first. In a lot of lanes, you kind of need Bork to basically win the lane fights faster, like a Darius matchup, for example. So we go for Bork, Stridebreaker, Boots, and then we go for Titanic Hydra if we need that extra damage, or go for a full tank or something if you need that other aspect. You can also go for a Hullbreaker at this point and then be a bit more split pushy, but that's way too split pushy in my opinion, right? Like at this point, you're just not even playing with your team. You're just playing side lane. And the thing about Sett side lane is that he does get outscaled pretty hard by basically every single champion who has any sort of scaling. Like I wouldn't look towards the split push kind of setup, but it is here if you need to go for it. So yeah, I mean, most of the time though, it's just Stridebreaker, whatever, bam, 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 and then you go for your tank options, right? Well, imagine Force Nature here. Anyway, Pantheon. Pantheon is a bit of a weirder option, right? Because now an additional option has opened up for him because you can go for Yumu's now instead of just Eclipse. You almost always go Eclipse on Pantheon. It works so well with you. You can go for Divine Sunder on Pantheon as well in some cases, but that's not gonna get replaced by Triforce because I don't play Pantheon, but you built Divine Sunder on Pantheon in the really hard bruiser matchups where you do need the extra healing, right? You can build it with Bork, for example, to do like insane amounts of damage to tanks with that W, you know? Like, I don't know, the empowered auto attack that comes after your W. Let me just find Divine Sunder here. First item. Dude, it is tough. There we go. Bam, bam. Like, that one person is probably just Spear Shot. But yeah, you can go for this kind of setup if you want to tear a new one into a tank or something, get that damage out with your W, stuff like that. That was the kind of builds before, but now you have an additional option of going for the Yumu's and Prowler's setup. And what this basically allows for you to do is it allows for you to roam outside of your ultimate cooldown. So if you've won your lane already and just want to roam around and just carry your team and kind of let the lane go a bit, you can go for this setup. And Prowler's Claw works really well with Pantheon because it kind of procs on your W, which is what you kind of use for, you know, setting up your kills anyway. So W, auto attack, that extra damage for Prowler's Claw, the extra sort of lethality from Yu's Ghost Blade, you're killing people before they can even think about it. So, like, it's like a sort of roamy assassin playstyle has opened up for Pantheon, whereas before you could still roam with him and get a lot of work done, but now you can get even more work done if you're super fed. But be really careful because going for this option makes you really bad at 1v1s. So I wouldn't really, I'd be very careful about going for this if you are up against a champion who does scale in the 1v1 better than you do, which is quite common, right? Pantheon is a very early game focused champion, and eventually you do get out-meted, and you have to be really creative with how you play the game, because at some point you can't 1v1 champions. Like if you beat a Darius, for example, kill him 5-10 times, but at the very end of the game, if you have the same items, he's going to kill you anyway because he pulls tank items, and you can't really do too much against that. So, yeah. Olaf, I'd say Olaf builds are basically the exact same. With Starbreaker being buffed, you can obviously go for a Starbreaker setup here, right? And kind of just use the Starbreaker and the extra AD from it. But in my opinion, the best setup is just the one with the Ravenous Hydra into a Jaksho, right? And then just build the bruiser items that you need to win the game. He does like the stack exchanges a bit, but it doesn't really make sense all that much because you have tenacity anyway. I mean, you have CC immunity anyway in your ultimate, so I guess he likes the shield, I suppose, but he doesn't really like the tenacity changes too much. It doesn't really make a difference for him. I suppose in some matchups where you do need to hold people down and you can't just land your Qs for it, you can go for a Starbreaker. I wouldn't bother with a Hullbreaker on Olaf, in my opinion. We're not playing Olaf to split push. We're playing him to basically just go berserk in team fights, and a Hullbreaker is kind of like an antithesis of that kind of playstyle and that kind of like line of thought. We could also just use Triforce sometimes, I guess. I suppose you can kind of pair it up like this to go for like a full-on damage build and just be like a monster. You can also pair up Triforce with a Sterak's to actually get the synergy going, to have like a bit more power than usual. But I feel like that's just kind of like, it's kind of too risky. It's kind of too like discovery thing. You're not Christopher Columbus. You're just some guy playing solo queue. Just go for like, you know, your typical Jaksho setup, and you should be fine for your most matches as Olaf, unless you really need that Starbreaker slow, right? You just replace this with boop. Done. Easy. Build the default items as before. Kennen's builds haven't really changed too much, right? Same as before. We're going for our Proto Belt at all times, bam, and then we just build whatever we need. You can go for some, if you go for some Moose Speed ability spamming, you can go for this, but, you know, Shadow Flame is really good because it gives you that extra magic pen, and a lot of people have shields nowadays. You got to get our Zhonya's Hourglass. It is a must-buy for Kennen. You can't function without this, and they just scale into what you need. Maybe you needed that CC immunity so you don't get, like, so you can actually run in and do your thing with your ultimate before you get waved away by some sort of CC, right? Then I guess some magic pen or something to get some damage on into the more durable members of the enemy team. Just, you know, nothing too complicated, right? Same old stuff. Gnar's builds are also the same as before, nothing really too different. The Triforce getting more love hasn't really changed anything for Gnar because he built Triforce anyway, right? So, and I don't think Hullbreaker is something you should go for with Gnar at all. With Gnar, you gotta use your tankiness to help your team out in team fights, and Hullbreaker is not really, like, it doesn't do that, right? Hullbreaker does not do that. Hullbreaker lets you split push more, but we're not split pushing more as Gnar, are we? We're kind of just working with a team. So, go for Hullbreaker, go for your Cleaver. Then you can just go for a Sterak's if you want to really juice up the damage on your Triforce, but then we're just going for a tank build without this, you know. But yeah, I mean, without Sterak's, I would not even go for Sterak's here. I would just go for, like, tank items, right? Something like this. Anyway, I mean, without the Maw, imagine, like, a Force of Nature or something like that, okay? In any case, up next we have our Poppy. Poppy's a bit of a weird case, but I don't think she's going to be using Triforce all that well. I think if you're going to go for a Bruiser Mythic, you're still going to be stuck in Divine Sunder. Now, I can imagine how a Hullbreaker might be useful in some cases, but I really wouldn't go for it, right? With Poppy, you are a tank. You are staying with your team. You are working with your team. Hullbreaker does not make any sense. You're better off just going for, like, Like if you're going for a booster mythic, just get your Divine Sunder, get your cooking done earlier on into the game, and then just go into a tank setup. But if you don't want Divine Sunder, you can just go for a... Oh, God. You can go for a Iceburn Gauntlet, right? Work with that, bam, bam. Sapphire Aegis, Iceburn Gauntlet, and then just go into the rest of your build. Nasus. I feel like Nasus can use the new Triforce a bit, right? I would still think that Divine Sunder is the better choice in the vast majority of the games because it's a safer option, right? It's just more safe. But I feel like with Nasus having a lot of stats as is, Triforce can get a lot of work done in that it's a far more better offensive option, okay? And the stats for the Mythic Passive, etc., are way better for Nasus than Divine Sunder because Divine Sunder gave us Armor Pen and Magic Pen, which we don't need on Nasus. We have so many Qs that we just like, tanks are no issue for us, and we heal through our lifesteal anyway. Triforce gives us more damage, more attack speed, it gives us better Mythic Passive, and a threefold strike. The more you're in combat, the more damage the Sheen does, which works wonderfully well with Nasus. So I feel like Triforce is something you guys are going to have to try out a lot if you're a Nasus player. I wouldn't go for Hullbreaker. It's a bit too overkill for Nasus, in my opinion, right? You're better off just going for your safe tank items and just going for it that way. You can go for Hullbreaker, I guess, if you're kind of fed, but again, I don't think it's good. I think it's better to kind of... Hullbreaker is like for Nasus, in this case, of what we're talking about, it improves your offensive capability, but I feel like with Nasus, it's best to just cover your behind in terms of like the tank items you need to like cover yourself from the things that kill you, like magic damage. Let's go for some Force of Nature so we can run around it or whatever. Oh, they got some sort of on-hit ADC that can mess me up. Let's go for our Force of Nature. And with ADC doing a lot more damage, you really do need to tank up quite quickly as early as you can on Nasus. So yeah, example build setup right here. Nothing really too set in stone, but it's just, I think Triforce should be tried out a lot more on Nasus, in my opinion, at least. Oh, yeah. I think in my opinion the same for this, of course, but whatever. Man, I gotta drink more water. I've been talking for like an hour. Things during my matches that I record, I take breaks between them, but here, no breaks. Oh. Okay, Renekton is kind of not doing too well in solo queue, and I don't think these changes have done anything to alleviate that problem. We're still going for Bork most of the time, your boots, and then we're looking into like I guess a Gore Drinker. I suppose he likes the added HP of Gore Drinker to make him a bit more meaty. I guess you can go for a Striker in some cases, but these are very rare, very fringe cases. Most of the time, you're going for like Gore Drinker. You're going for Gore Drinker in the vast majority of cases. You're either building it second or third in terms of doing a Cleaver after Bork, right? You can go for Bork Cleaver, and then you go for Gore Drinker, right? It's like you're going for Gore Drinker the vast majority of the time. So, yeah. The old Prowler's Claw kind of gave Renekton like an additional playstyle in terms of just you could just build lethality and just like damage and just like Prowler's Claw and ADC, kill them instantly and then just like die, but you're one-shotting the most important person on the enemy team. So that kind of playstyle got swept away, and it's not going to be replaced by going for like some sort of cheese Yumu's first item, right? That's just not going to happen. So unfortunately, that's gone. I feel like with that setup being taken away, Renekton's options have been diminished, so he's going to be struggling a bit more. But the default setup is just with Gore Drinker, Cleaver, and then I guess Bruiser items, something like this, right? Akshan. Akshan is absolutely going to love the new Yumu's Ghostblade. This thing works so well with Akshan's gameplay because he's like, whole thing is just roaming and getting stuff done around the map with his invisibility. This thing gives you more move speed, more lethality. It just works so well with him. And you can combine this, because first item is not that good, because you need something that'll help you in lane too. So you can combine this with like a, not combine it, but just work better. You get like a Stormrazor first item, because it gives you like early game damage with the active of it, right? Combine it with a Yumu's Ghostblade, and just run around the map getting stuff done as Akshan. This is like a very nice setup that you can go for on him. And it just works with his like whole sort of roaming fantasy even better. Now you can't go for a scaling setup like this with your Kraken Slayer and Ginsu's. These two items are like a match made in heaven. They're like, right, designed them to be like built together. As to go for like an on-hit setup, you know, maybe go for like LDR if you need that. If you are getting killed, you can go for Momo Shiba, whatever, right? Just what you need in terms of all ADC items, because Akshan can build all of them, but you kind of have the roaming assassin setup, which is like a new thing you can go for, or you can go for the old scaling damage setup, which has also been changed, and you can build through like this. I mean, maybe not Bork, but just, you know, on hit. You have to go on hit, right? I don't know about Bloodthirster on Akshan, in my opinion, because you're not Draven, right? with Akshan, you're not doing a ton of damage, but you're doing enough damage, right? And the thing is, Draven does a ton of damage, right? So he heals up a lot. But with Akshan, you're not doing that levels of damage, so you're not going to get too much use out of Bloodthirster, right? So I feel like the on-hit setup is way better for him. Kled. With Kled, I feel like his build hasn't changed too much, right? You're still looking for going for Ravenous Hydra, Eclipse, you know, get that Eclipse thing going, and then Cleaver, bam, bam, bam. Just the regular old setup. You can't go Sterak's on Kled. You can't go Hullbreaker on him either, because Kled's whole thing is just you're the engage. You make plays, you make stuff happen. You're the one who starts team fights, right? So Hullbreaker kind of just defeats the whole point, because you're kind of supposed to work with your team. I guess you can go for Starbreaker to like kind of be a bit more teamworky, I suppose. But that's like in fringe cases, and a lot of the times you kind of want the Eclipse to help you in the 1v1. You know, the extra shield and stuff, and the Starbreaker might not be too good against some of these champions. I guess it can help you kite them a bit, but kiting isn't exactly Kled's forte. Yeah, there's nothing really new here, right? He can't really use any of the new items, any of the changed items, any of the buffed items, aside from just Starbreaker and kind of Gold Drinker, I suppose. But those are like the fringe cases. We're mostly going for Eclipse here. Tryndamere. Tryndamere is like... Okay, I'm going to explain it in two ways, right? Before, you kind of had a choice to go for teams where you just needed damage, or teams where you needed mobility, okay? So if you needed mobility, you go for Gale Force. If you need damage, you went for Kraken Slayer. It's kind of paralleled to here as well, where teams where you need mobility, you go for your Gale Force, and then you can pair this up with like other items, like you can go for your Phantom Dancer, and then just kind of build for what you need for the rest of that game, like this, get some wave clear going. I mean, you can't build any more crit in your last two items because, you know, 3 crit items is enough, right? But yeah, this is like for more mobility, more utilities type of playstyle. Or you can go for something where you're just kind of trying to do as much damage as possible. Where you're going for Kraken Slayer, you can go for IE, right, just to light people up. But in general, I'm thinking that Gale Force, like Kraken being separated from Gale Force, has allowed you to build them both at the same time, which is kind of good in my opinion. But I don't know, man. It's just a bit weird because you just have to make the choice in lane. Do you need the damage? Kraken Slayer. Or do you need the mobility? Then Gale Force. And after that, you can either build Gale Force or you can go for like an IE or something if you just need to put damage. But I feel like Gale Force is better after Kraken because like if you're building damage Kraken, you can go for Gale Force second. If you're building Gale Force first, you can go for just your utility as I showed in the first build. But this is like your ideal build if you don't need Gale Force first item. So after the second item, we're looking at basically just going for I guess the utility things. We can go for one more crit item, which I think can be good for Phantom Dancer. Phantom Dancer I think is a perfect option. But I can also just go for SS Reaver, right? Also, if you don't really want what did I say IE? No, not Reverse Cookblade. I said IE instead of... That's why I was confused. Okay. I just look pretty stupid. But yeah, obviously when I was over IE above all points in time because it gives us the ability haste that we love on Tryndamere. So this is the setup that you want if you don't need Gale Force, right? So we go Kraken if we don't need Gale Force, and then we go the Never's Cook Blades, and then you can go for other items. I'm kind of a bit skeptical on Static Shiv. I guess you can get it if you don't want to waste your gold on like a Ravenous Hydra for wave clear, right? But again, I feel like a Phantom Dancer is the best option because then you can go for like a Cyril does, right, and get that extra bit of ability haste to even get even more spins out, right? But yeah, I feel like the build is Tryndamere builds are a bit of a jumble right now, and obviously I'm not that good of a Tryndamere player. I mean, I'm not a player of any of the other champs I'm talking about, but I kind of know less of what I'm talking about with Tryndamere because he's a very specialized case. He's not like a crit ADC. He's not like a bruiser. He's a crit melee champion. So to give my verdict on it, I have to think about it a bit further, kind of like I did for the Yone&Yasuo. But I'm thinking it's basically the same case as before, right? As I tried to set it up in the beginning, but I just fumbled. So if you need Gale Force, you're going for a more of a utility-ish build, right? But if you need your, if you don't need Gale Force, you can just go for full damage. You can go for Kraken Slayer, and then you can go for your Never's Cookblade, and then just start going to town, right? I don't think Ginsu's is a good item on Tryndamere at all, though. I would stay away from Ginsu's, like, completely. You can also just go for no, you can't go for pearls. No, it's stupid, isn't it? Yeah, it's just dumb. So yeah, I mean, I just explained the builds you can go for. I feel like there's no one cookie cutter build for Tryndamere, right? You kind of just have to go for what you need for that match. And also Tryndamere is like, there's so many Tryndamere players who do their own thing. There's not really like a standardized build for it. You just kind of go for whatever you kind of need for the game and what you kind of find fun, I suppose. But I'd say it all revolves around whether you need Gale Force or not. If yes, Gale Force. If no, no Force Quick Blade. You kind of want Kraken no matter what. Like, I think Kraken is like a must build in Tryndamere's build at some point. I don't even know what to think about how funny the extra crit damage will be. It's gonna be so awesome when you're diving people because you can just get like those or attacks off over and over and over again and just get that extra magic damage and just like completely overwhelm someone. Then yeah, Hullbreaker could be a thing that you could go for with Tryndamere. But it's one of those champions where you gotta get your items out as quickly as possible. I wouldn't go for Hullbreaker's second item, I'll go for Hullbreaker's third item. So like Kraken Slayer, Gale Force, and a Hullbreaker if it was here, but it isn't. But you guys get the idea, right? Like I wouldn't go for it with second item because we got like emergency things to build first. Cho'Gath. I say Cho'Gath's build is just basically the same as before. We're going for a Heart Seal, bam, and then just full tank. Or if you're going for like crit, not crit, AP, you can go for your Everfrost. Yep, you can go for your Everfrost and then just like build that kind of setup. But the Cho'Gath's build is basically the exact same. Volibear. Volibear needs a lot of love. None of the changes are going to be impacting his gameplay too much. I guess you can go for Triforce if you're going for some sort of booster setup, but it's just so irregular, man. It's not really where you're going most of the time. These on-hit setups are so cheese. I wouldn't even like go near them. Your Ginsus or whatever. These are just too cheese. They're too like troll. Just stay away from them, in my opinion, at least. The most you can do in terms of on-hit is to go for like Nash's Tooth, Riftmaker, right, to get some AP damage in your E, and then go for some sort of boost really tanky setup. But even then, it's like a bit, you kind of have to be in a matchup where you can get your E's off on them. So you might be better off just going for like Iceborne Gauntlet to get your E's off more guaranteed. And then we're looking at whatever you need for the game. If you need your AP, you can go for Nash's Tooth. Good 1v1-2. Need more wave clear, mobility, whatever. You can't really get all attacks up, but you'll be around the enemy. Just, Volibear is such a trash champion right now. There's not a good build for him. They all just suck. Because the champion sucks. I'm sorry to all the Volibear players, but he really needs some changes. I don't really want him buffed because he's a very toxic champion to play against. I hate point-and-click stuns, and it takes a lot of good champion design to make point-and-click CC like fun to fight against. Volibear is one of those champions where his point-and-click CC is like one of the most toxic in the game. So even every time he's like viable, it's just so annoying to play against him. But it's sad. He's been so unviable for so long that I think like they need to really change things in his kit. I'd say give him more counterplay and then buff him up. Mundo's builds also haven't really changed all that much. You're still going for the same stuff, right? Like nothing's really too different. It's a tank. Tanks didn't get a lot of love, so yeah. Teemo. I'd say Teemo, we're going for like the same items as before, right? If you want early 1v1 power, we go for Nash's Tooth, and then we can go for our AP items right here. Buff up our ultimate to be as like crazy strong as possible. I see a lot of Teemos going for on hit, which is absolutely cringes me. Don't do this on Teemo. Like going for on hit with like AP is bad enough, but doing it with like crit items is just crazy. Because the thing about Teemo is that your range isn't high enough and your mobility isn't high enough. It's not good enough to be an effective ADC. You're just kind of like a worse ADC in top lane. But your champion is capable of so much more in that you have your ultimate. Teemo's ultimate is so powerful because if the enemy Teemo is good, your team cannot walk around the map without sweeper, right? If you walk without sweeper, it's like, you know, your ADC gets half healthed, right? Your front line activates, I don't know, with their Sterax or something early. It's like they walk into it while doing Baron after winning a fight, and they all just die, so they can't take the objective anymore. Teemo's ultimate is an insanely powerful and game-changing ability if used properly. And if you build like a crit on-hit setup, you basically sacrifice all the things you can do with your ultimate. So I'd say stick to AP, but it is important to have that early attack power. So you could go for your Nash's Tooth first, and then, you know, as I described, right? Yorick. Dude, Yorick absolutely loves the Hullbreaker changes. Like he could just like do so much with this bad boy. It's like this item is kind of made for him if you think about it, right? He's a slow lumbering juggernaut who's split pushing. Like it's just think of it. Think about a champion who uses Hullbreaker, Yorick. Oh god, I'm very sorry, but yeah, sometimes I can't help it. Anyway, Yorick is absolutely loving Hullbreaker as mentioned. I wouldn't go for a first item. I would say go for like a Sheen item. I think Triforce is absolutely huge for Yorick right now. Really good. Go for it. I think it needs a lot more testing. I find it to be better than Divine Sunder, if I'm being honest. Obviously, Jarvan's Hunter is pretty good too, because it's like the New York setup where you're going for like the wave clear and go for AD to just toss your E at someone and have your ghouls kill them, right? So that kind of setup was like this, bam, and then we're going for like an Eclipse, and then we can go for a Cyrilda's Cleaver, right? And at this point, you have a fully ability minions like ghoul setup. You toss your E at an ADC, and if they get hit, the ghouls just basically one-shotter on their own. So this is a very powerful setup, but I feel like very few Yorks are good enough to pull this kind of setup off. Like if you're one of the few Yorks in the world who can do this, if you're not one of those few Yorks in the world who can do this, then I would not really look at the setup too much. I feel like the normal Bruiser setup is more easy to use and kind of York, like kind of human friendly. Let's just put it that way, right? But yeah, so yeah, like a Triforce, you don't go for Yumu's. Do not go for Yumu's. It's way too cheese. You're a spell pusher, not a roamer. But yeah, so sort of setup where let's say you're up against a bruiser who's doing 80 damage. Obviously, you can go for Divine Sunder if you're up against a tank or something who's putting up a fight. You kind of can't really survive against it in Alden, so you need to get the extra healing. But Triforce, bam, Hullbreaker, and then we're just looking at what we need, right? Like a full tank setup, kind of. Or if you want to, you can still go for the damage things even after this point. You can have some versatility to work with from this point. Now, you can go for both tank and go for damage based on where you're kind of looking at in terms of the enemy team, right? Singed, this champion, I don't even want to talk about. It's like you say his name 3 times and he just spawns behind you and flips you. It doesn't even do anything, just flips you. I flip minion like burger. Anyway, I feel where's this? There we go. Yep. I feel like you go Rylai's first into a lot of matchups, and then you just kind of devolve into whatever you need for the game. As Singed, you don't really need a lot of AP items. You kind of just need you need like the dot AP items. So we're looking at this. This is an item they want to build basically every single game. You can pair it up with a Rylai's at some point to be even more better, because if someone gets into your poison, the slow means that they're going to be inside of it longer. So Rylai's works really well with your poison, and this works really well with both your poison and your Rylai's. So this is a duo of items that you want to build with Singed at some point. You gotta have these two. Boots of Sweeties are insanely good on Singed. You really want these bad boys. Like, well, Singed is all about running around the map and cooking, basically. So unless you really need to have the Toppies or like the Merc Treads, you're going for your Merc Treads to basically outmaneuver people and just cheese kill them. Your mythic choice doesn't really matter too much on Singed. You can go for a Radiant Virtue to like have your ult buff up your entire team. You can go for Portable if you want to just run up on squishies and just kind of flip them better, but you already do that, so it's not really that useful. If you're into, you can go for Evershroud because it's cheaper, right? And it basically makes it like kind of a pick champion. I would hesitate to go for too much AP aside from all this, right? I just go for like the items that can do playmaking, right? So maybe like I don't know, like an Evershroud, maybe get some stuff like that. No, not that. Something like this. Let's get like a Force of Nature to be more annoying. Maybe get like a Zonian Zarglass or something like that. Oh, Abyssal Mask sounds really good on Singed, actually, I think. Like, if you have an AP champion on your team, not for yourself, obviously, because you don't stay near the enemy when you're poisoning them, you kind of just leave your poison and run away. If you have an AP champion on your team, you can go for, man, this interface. Where's the item? Bam, bam. Go for this, and then with you can go for this and Evershroud to basically set up damage for a team even better, like together, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna be honest. This is just kind of what I've seen other Singed players build. I don't really know for sure what's the best setup myself. Okay, this is like one of those few cases where it's so one tricky, so specific that I can't be too confident about the builds I'm recommending here. I guess you can go for sort of a scaly setup with Rod of Ages, but again, this is not my ballpark, but I'd say the setups I've laid out are clear, right? You can go for the like this sort of setup. You got to build these two at some point. If you don't need the slow for the lane, you can go for Rod of Ages first and then kind of just scale up. You're not going to be winning your lane and snowballing anytime soon, but you do scale up into being like an annoying monster. They can go for like Sonya's this, or maybe even like a Cosmic Insight, and just run on the map being completely just a terror for the enemy backline. So yeah, that's Singed, Urgot. I know Urgot used to build Prowler's Claw, so I'm pretty sure there's like a setup with Urgot where you can go for like a Yumu's Ghostblade. Where is it? There we go. Like a Yumu's Ghostblade setup on Urgot. Maybe you can go for something like this where you're kind of just roaming around. You're basically a bruiser, but you're going for Yumu's to just run on the map, use your ultimate to get picks off on fetch champions and stuff like that. Like it was a setup on Urgot. Prowler's Claw got removed, but Yumu's is kind of taking its place. So for that kind of playstyle, you can just go for Yumu's Ghostblade. Now, you don't want to build a new Prowler's Claw. It just sucks on Urgot, in my opinion. If you're going for, I guess, like a really roamy setup, you can pair up the Yumu's with a Prowler's Claw, right? Someone like, well, I guess second item, but it's really risky, and I wouldn't even go for it, right? In my opinion, the old setup is still the best with Urgot, of just going for meat bag items. Let's go for like a... You can use your Strybreaker to help you get more of your shotgun knees out with your for your ultimate, so you can get the execute out. So Bam, Triforce, Titanic, Sterax, something like this. Just a good old beefy Urgot setup. You know, like too special. You can also go for something like a bit more tank oriented with a Jaksho, right? That's also a possible option for you. But I mean, Urgot can't really use all the new changes too much. You can also go for Hullbreaker, I guess, but I wouldn't recommend it too much because the silent champions that Urgot kind of fails against don't really get countered by Hullbreaker. Hullbreaker doesn't change whether champions who beat you in silent already can beat you or not. Okay, it doesn't really make a difference there. So I'm not too sure about Hullbreaker. And Urgot is kind of like a slow champion, so you're very rarely in a team fight where none of your teammates are near you, right? You kind of just stationary, you're slow, you're kind of methodical. So Hullbreaker is a bit of a cheese item unless you go for first to kind of like again cheese the early game. But I'd say the same old setup where you're going for like Strybreaker, like I just showed with Cleaver, Sterax, Titanic Hydra, tank items, is basically good to go. You don't need to basically make things any more complicated. I'd say for games where you're building Iceborne, I'd say Strybreaker takes that item's role, right? Strybreaker is just better. It's like an amazing item for the games where you really need that slow. And yeah, I guess if you want to be tanky, you can go for the Draksha build. But the builds I showed off were basically it, right? Yeah, so I talked about already. Rumble, I'd say Rumble, just, you know, your regular old AP champion, right? Nothing too special. You need Zion's Arlos and Rumble. Yeah, like something like this, I guess. I mean, I'm not a Rumble expert. Nobody even plays him anymore. But just your regular AP build, nothing's really too different with this boy. Vayne. I feel like Vayne is one of the champions who are worst off from the changes, right? Like, she just gets outranged by practically everybody, and she can't really make use of the, like, her auto range is just way too slow. Right? It's way too short, right? And you can't really do too much against her, when the Jhin just kind of pops you once and just runs out away from you with Mach 7. And it just, like, you pop out of your invis, like, hey, where'd you go? And then just, like, dinks you on the head from, like, Africa. Like, you can't really do too much against that as Vayne, so she's kind of struggling against other ADC champions, but in top lane, I guess she's just doing her own old cooking thing, right? I wouldn't go for Ginsu's as Vayne initially. I feel like that's just asking for trouble. You can go for a static Shiv, I guess, if you want to have the early wave clear. That is something that Vayne really struggles with, so I think that could help you out a lot. Like, top lane, you do kind of need wave clear, right? If you're kind of just pushing someone under turret and poking them down, you can kind of just go for, like when the minions come in, you can hit the minions and just run away, and the electrocution will hit the enemy champion. You can use that for smart poke if you are creative enough. Then we're going for our boots, obviously second item. And after this point, you kind of have a choice. You can go for your Ginsu's and then go for some sort of on-hit setup and then just scale that way. You can never go wrong with a late game Vayne build. I guess you can go for a more of a durable setup, but you're gonna have to build Ginsu's anyway at some point, because there's just no other like good mythic for Vayne right now. Like Ginsu's on its own isn't even that great, but you're just gonna have to build something, and it is that something. So yeah. Rengar can basically make use of like every single changed item. You can use the same sort of roam combo with Yumu's and Prowler's Claw with Rengar to just like run on the map, get a bunch of kills, and just like take over the map single-handedly. So that is a very powerful place that you can go for as Rengar. You can just go for like the same bruiser stuff with like Divine Sunder, Gore Drinker, Triforce. Rengar can use all of these items. So bam, bam, and then just like a tanky setup, I suppose. Maybe not this exact one. That's just weird. Yeah. Wow. Okay. But it's been aren't just building Divine Center anymore. But yeah. You guys go for a Triforce setup. There we go. It has a lot of good stats for Rengar, and he kind of likes it pretty good, right? Go for some tank stuff. Gorge, I'm not too sure. Unless you're going for some sort of weird ability haste stacking setup. Let me just find Gore Drinker. Does it have the one with Sonya? It's not really. Okay. I can't really find it here, but there is a Rengar setup you can go for where you're like just like mashing as much ability haste as possible. So you can go into the enemy team and just like WWW and just like spam W the entire time. Like it's a setup that you can actually go for, which is like pretty crazy, right? You're not there to kill everyone. You're there to waste people's time. So it's a setup you can go for, but I feel like just going for the the roam playstyle as Rengar is the best option. If Yumu's doesn't like suit you, you can also just go for a Dusk Blade, right, and play that kind of assassin playstyle. You could just play like a bruiser in terms of like just go for a Triforce, go for a Cleaver. I mean, you can also go for Divine Sunder, Cleaver, and then get like a Death Dance, Maw, whatever. Just Rengar can build all bruiser items, almost all assassin items, and also some crit items. So this champion is completely versatile. You just gotta build what you want to build in terms of what you want to do. So if you're gonna roam a lot, take over the game, assassin. If you're gonna help your team a lot and just like kind of be like a tanky presence, then go for ability haste focus with bruiser items. If you want to just be completely unknown for the enemy team, ability haste focus with just pure ability haste AP regardless of whatever happens. If you want to be a 1v1 kind of just split pushing monster, then you're looking at your Sheen items with some of the bruiser items as well. You can also go for crit if you want to be a solid DPS source, I guess, with your Essence Fury, etc. But you're not going full crit as Rengar. No Nightbull crit Rengar builds. RIP. Maokai's build is basically the same as before, nothing really different. I guess you can go for Abyssal Mask to make yourself do more damage and make your team do more damage, but that's just like a fringe case, isn't it? Like, it's the same old tank build, right? There's nothing really too special about, his builds, right? You're going for Sapphire Aegis first item anyway, most of the time. You can just kind of flex, like, I guess Abyssal Mask is like the version of Sunfire against AP champions, if you think about it, right? So you go for first instead of Sunfire, right? You're building either of them first, and then you go into your Mythic, and you go for Evershroud if you want to be a bit more supportive. If you want to be a tanky meathead, Jux is always a great option, right? But Bam, Boots, Mythic, I'd say a Jaxo, be a meathead, and then just full tank, right? But yeah, nothing's too different. Do not build Fimbulwinter. Do not build Fimbulwinter. Anyway, I guess you can build it, but it's like such a weird cheese item. You have to build a tier on Maokai. Like, just, I don't know, man. Quinn is gonna love this patch. She's gonna love this patch. The whole Akshan thing, where you can go for like the Yumu's Prowler, is actually insane on her, because you can kind of just go for these items and just jump in, one shot on ADC, and just return back to the lane without losing any CS. Yumu's in combination with like Quinn ult makes her so insanely fast on the map that it's like unbelievable. She could be everywhere and anywhere she wants to be at once. It's like omnipresence. It's like just crazy. I feel like if you have the macro and like the eye for ganks, you can completely take over games as Quinn. If you could just delay your Yumu's and go for a Stormrazor first, and then go for like a Yumu's afterwards, and then go for an assassin setup like this. This is a set that the Akshan uses, but I feel like because you kind of go in, you can also go for a Prowler's Claw as well. Now, the whole scaling setup where you go for Kraken Slayer, bam, I guess you go for something like this. You can't go for on hit with Quinn. It just doesn't work. You're kind of going for like the old traditional crit with just some upfront damage. This kind of setup can work, but I feel like you're not utilizing the champion's maximum power by going for something like this. I feel like if you're going to go for crit, you might as well just go for Gale Force like this. I suppose you could also go for like Stormrazor Gale Force. That could also work quite well too. If you're up against a team where you want to go in, get kills, but they do have some fighting back capacity where it's like you go in, but you have to also kind of get out and kite them quite a bit, then Gale Force could be quite useful, right? So this kind of setup so you're building Yumus in fights where you just gotta go in, get kills. But if you gotta get out as well, and you need mid-fight mobility because you have some enemy champion who can kind of get on top of you very easily, then you definitely need Gale Force. And Gale Force is an amazing option because of the damage being changed. You're building a ton of lethality anyway, and all that lethality is going to be like just even better with Gale Force. I guess we don't have any lethality yet, but if you go for the assassin setup, then we most certainly will have it, right? But yeah, Quinn is just loving the patch. Vladimir, my voice is just crumbling. Jesus Christ. Vladimir, same old stuff. You're just going for your mythic, right? Night Harvester Pro Belt, boots, go for Cosmic Drive. Most of the time, it's like the most clear option. Then just look at what you need. You definitely need Zonia's Hourglass on Vladimir. Then bam, bam. You can go for Pro Belt as well. I feel like against a lot of the champions who are good at getting on top of you, Pro Belt is a bit better, especially in lane. Sometimes you definitely need it in lane. Do not build Night Harvester on Vladimir top ever, right? Like Pro Belt is just way too useful, and it helps you a lot, so much against some of the matchups that if you build Night Harvester, you're just kind of like a kill condition. Because if they have like Stridebreaker and Night Harvester, they can slow you down enough to just kind of kill you eventually, even if you have Phase Rush, right? So bam, 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 something like this, right? Vladimir is pretty simple as far as builds go, right? Just build whatever you need. If you need like if you need to be like if you're being CC'd down, you can go for Banshees as well. I didn't see that much. If you're up against a lot of armor, go for Zonia's. But I feel like you should go for Zonia's anyway because it works so well with Vladimir's kit, right? Armor pen, but you're gonna go for it anyway, and then just Ravenous. Tom Kench. Tom Kench's build hasn't really changed all that much, right? You're still going for the same. Bro, what? Oh, yeah. It hasn't changed all that much. You're still going for the same stuff. You can basically build all the tank mythics, but we're basically just looking for a Heartsteel or an Iceborne Gauntlet. You can go for Jackshaw later on into the game, I guess. If you want to go with Sunfire, you can go for Jackshaw like this. Bam, bam, bam. Full tank. If you want to, I guess, lick people with high HP damage more, you can go for Heartsteel early. But I would not recommend this. Heartsteel is not that good of an item without the resistance, so I'm going to be... I recommend going for the Sunfire into Jackshaw more than going for Heartsteel at all, right? So like that kind of combo is way better than Heartsteel. It's just kind of like a cheese item. They don't really want to be relying on it too much. It gets worse as you get higher in rank. Why aren't the other builds showing? What is this, man? Whatever. So yeah, fine. Okay. So you can also go for something with Iceborne Gauntlet, right? It's also another option. But Tom's like, Tom's build is just this. It's the box standard tank setup, right? You're not really looking at anything creative, special, anything different. So yeah, Warwick. I'd say Warwick is a bit changed because you can go for Triforce now, right? It's a bit better than Divine Thunder if you're going for kills on squishes and etc. But I'd be really careful about it in any case. Not careful about it. So build wise, you almost always want Bork first. Bork first works so well with Warwick. They don't really want to go for anything else. Then we're looking at going for a Triforce, let's say, and then go for on hit and whatever like you need to build against any team. I mean, as Warwick, you have access to all the bruiser items, so your death stances, Mortises, Wits Ends, all this stuff, you have access to them, and you can build Hullbreaker too, I suppose, but it's a bit too cheese. Because if you're going for that kind of setup, then you're kind of forced to split push. But the thing is, right, at some point, you're going to have to help your team out, right? If Warwick is not that great at split pushing because he's kind of slow, and you're going to basically have to kill people on their turret. And if you're against like a Fiora or a Jax in the side lane, you're not going to, like, that Hullbreaker is not going to stop that Jax from just tearing you a new one. So, yeah, I wouldn't really go for this. I would go for a setup where you're going for Bork, Triforce, and you're basically just running around killing the enemy team squishies, okay? Do not go for Ginsu's. In my opinion, this is really risky. If you're super fed, you can maybe go for it, right? If you're super fed. And I emphasize the super, because if you're somewhat behind or even and you go for Ginsu's, you're kind of like sabotaging your own gameplay, okay? So build the Bork first, get the kills, and then go for Ginsu's if you want. But if you do, you might scale into being a solid damage source, but remember that you are melee. So what's going to happen is, once the enemy team scales up in terms of their damage, unless you're on that ADC, like, someone's going to peel you off that ADC, someone's going to CC you, and that ADC is going to run back, with the Gale Force they have right now, and they survived because they have Shield Wall right now, and it's gonna pop you down with their Ginsus and Kraken Slayer, Lord Dominus Regard, just like kill you really quickly. Okay, so if you're capable of, with your skills, your knowledge, your macro of ending the game by the time you have 3-4 items, then go for Ginsus. But this is a risky option, and if I'm being honest, you're playing Warwick. So we're not looking for anything complex with Warwick, okay? We're just looking for simple stuff. So just go for your Triforce. Or if you don't even want to think about that, go for like Divine Thunder and just play like the old times, okay? And don't even like go for any different setup, okay? So yeah. Silas. I'd say with Silas, just the same old setup. We're going for Everfrost, bam, 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 right? Just whatever AP item you need. Nothing really too set in stone, but you're basically limited to like 5, 6, 10 items, right? Well, that's a big range, but like 6 or 7 items essentially, right? So you can go for, I guess, Rod of Ages, but I feel like this is really selfish. I think it's way better for your team if you go for an Everfrost, right? This works so well because you can actually set CC up. You can set your chain up. If somebody is behind a target, you can go for like a dash to the side, like CC them with the Everfrost, dash to the side, and then just chain to them. Like the versatility in terms of playmaking this gives you is way more worth it than the extra stats that the Rod of Ages would give you. Now, I guess eventually you would scale incredibly well with Rod of Ages, but then again, it is a bit iffy. You still have damage options in terms of Night Harvester / Lindry's, not Ludus. So yeah. All in all, nothing really too different. Zac, box standard, tank build, bam. You can go for Radiant Virtue. It works a lot better with Zac because you have a lot of health and you're healing anyway, so you're just going to be like a Mundo essentially, just crazy healing out. You can also pair your Sunfire up with a Jaggsho. Go for Demonic Abyss if you're fed. Like, this is a great item if you are fed. If you're not, just go for your normal tank setup anyway. I wouldn't go for Zhonya's Hourglass. I feel like if you Zhonya's, you're disappearing from the fight, which leaves it so that the enemy team could just run at your backline, and you do not want to leave your backline alone by themselves, like at any point in the game. But yeah, just pick one of the mythics that you need. Evershot if you're helping your team out. Jaggsho after second item. Never build Jaggsho first item on any champion. If you want to be super tanky for your team, you can build Radiant Virtue if you want to be like a more of a healer and you don't really need to tank all the damage. If the enemy team has little damage, then Radiant Virtue is better. But little as in like little to medium to high. But if you have crazy damage, you're forced into building Jaggsho because you're not going to survive without it, right? Against some of the on-hit champions right now. Akali, basically the same, Protobelt, and just you have a pool of AP items to choose from. I guess you can go for Riftmaker, but I feel like Protobelt gives you more playmaking power, which you kind of need as Akali, right? Your positioning matters a lot, so Protobelt is way better. Cassiopeia, just the same AP build, right? You go on Cassiopeia, Rod of Ages, and Archangel Staff. This is the duo that you want to go for. This is like the scaling setup on scaling AP champions, and then you just go for whatever you need, right? Like I don't know, Cosmic Drive, let's say Banshee's Veil, and then just you can also slide in a tank item, I suppose. But like this is just a standard AP build. The only thing you need to remember are these two, and then the rest just decide in game based on what you need. Wukong. I'd say Wukong isn't really too different in terms of the changes. Obviously, you go for Triforce nowadays, right? But I don't think Styrax is too useful of an item with Wukong because you want Cleaver no matter what. The constant in basically all your builds is Black Cleaver. You want this item at some point, right? Second, third, right? You want this item at some point, right? So, want Black Cleaver almost at all times. And then we have Divine Sunder or Triforce first item, right? Triforce will squish your champions. Divine Sunder if you're kind of struggling or if you're against champions that fight back a lot and you need the healing in the middle of the fight. And I feel like Wukong does need the healing, so I feel like Divine Sunder works better with him rather than Triforce. Triforce gives you a lot more damage though, so there's that to think about as well. So if you want to be like if you're super fed, Triforce. If you're fed, Triforce. Triforce is way better if you're fed because you just become unkillable and you destroy everybody. Divine Sunder is more of like a if you're behind option. After which you can go for whatever booster items you need for that game. Like, you know, your Death Stances, your Mormoshuses, or no Ravenous Hydra. I'm not too sure about that. You buy this item earlier, you don't buy it at all. And yeah, that is pretty much it. I'd say that is the end of this video as well, because now we're heading into the territory of champions that aren't actually top laners and are just cheese picks. Let me see. I'll do Trundle. Okay, this is just insane. Yeah, I'll do Trundle last. What a barren and wasteland of a play rate. I guess he's just a jungler now. Another G lost to the jungle. You can go for Triforce instead of Divine Center. I feel like with how he's been playing lately, that's the better option anyway. You definitely want to go for a split push instead of with Trundle. It's just abuse it, right? He kills turrets so quickly. If you go Triforce Hullbreaker, you can just chop up turrets like in seconds. So it's a really powerful way to go. I don't know about Bork first item. I guess it helps in some matchups, but it's way too risky. I feel like just go for Triforce and play it better, right? Like wasting gold on Bork is a bit cringe in my opinion. It's just not that good, right? And then I guess you can go for at some point to help you in side lanes, or you can go for like a full tank, or maybe even some of the booster items like a Death Stance or something like that. But Trundle just sucks right now. Don't expect some sort of legendary new crit build you can use on him to win the games. He is just trash. Anyway, I've been talking for almost 100 minutes. I'll see you boys in the next one. Peace out.